Allow me to introduce our participants. We've got people, reporters in the room. We've got some on the phone and some joining us on the web stream. Peter Dengate Thrush, Chairman of the Board, Rod Beckstrom, President and CEO, and Kurt Pritz, our Senior VP of Stakeholder Relations. Let's start. Rod, I believe you had a statement.
I do. Thank you. Thanks, Brad. Welcome to all of you, whether you're in the room or joining us remotely. Usually the big news coming out of an ICANN meeting occurs at the end of the week, not this time. Today we made history. This may be the dawn of a new age of online innovation in the domain name space. New generic top-level domains will be one of the biggest changes ever to the Internet's domain name system. For years, this program has been the subject of careful study, spirited, vigorous debate, and respected discussion. Today's decision reflects the contributions of countless individuals and organizations around the world who recognized the potential. No one can say with any certainty where new GTLDs will lead us. The Internet's addressing system has just been opened up to the limitless possibilities of human imagination and creativity. Now we want to tell the world about the opportunity to follow the dot with whatever they want. In advance of our call for applications at the first early in the new year. Today we're asking for your help in spreading the word. That date the program will open in the new year is January 12th, I believe. This meeting also marks another historic moment for ICANN, specifically the departure of our chairman of ICANN's board of directors. Peter Dengate Thrush has been a force behind major positive changes to ICANN itself and the Internet in his 4 years as chair, ushering in the new GTLD program, strengthening the compliance program, helping to launch the IDN program, supporting the evolution to the affirmation of commitments, and the signing of the DNSSEC to the root of the Internet. Major, major accomplishments just in the last couple of years I've been here, as well as many over the four. Peter, thank you for your leadership, wisdom, and diplomacy. You're respected and admired by all segments of our amazingly diverse community, and you will be missed. Peter, if you have any remarks, and then we'll take questions.
Well, thanks, Rod. I'm not gone yet, of course. I'm here until the end of the board meeting on Friday, so thank you for that.
We're going to open it up to questions now. Peter, we've got a question from a journalist not identified. Can you ask Peter Dengate Thrush for a general observation, comments, or reflections on the board vote today?
Yep, happy to. I think the first comment is what was on display was the passion and the intelligence and the carefulness that the board members bring to that particular task. I think you saw from the abstaining and dissenting and supporting directors evidence of the carefulness that they've approached this as they do with all other tasks. And I think that's one thing. The second thing I think is the passion that most of them bring, and the board has put an incredible amount of work into this. Board members have had to grapple to an extraordinary level and depth, if you like, all of the elements of this program to be able to confidently recommend it forward. I think the other thing is there's a sense of relief. It's been on the board's agenda now for at least 3 years. It's dominated much of the work of the board. We've had to schedule special, retreats and sessions to grapple with these issues. So I think all of those things is a sense of pride, I think, that in ICANN as an organisation. I think you saw a lot of them speaking about how this is a testimonial to the multi-stakeholder model and how the community has developed this in partnership with governments and the staff.
And I'm going to ask each person, each journalist that asks a question, if you could just give us your name and your affiliation, please.
Okay. Hi, Kevin Murphy, freelance with the Register. The GAC vote to ICANN at the weekend saying that there were important public policy objectives at risk here and that they may be put GTLD applications in conflict with applicable law. So I was wondering if you could explain your decision to reject that advice.
Well, I don't think that particular piece of advice is advice, it's information. There are many things that applicants are going to do that are going to break national laws, and it's up to national governments using their national laws to deal with them. Those kind of issues are really outside the scope of ICANN's mandate.
Well, but I'll clarify, could you explain your decisions to reject the actual GAC advice that you've rejected today?
Well, again, that's not a straightforward one. I think there's a 121-page rationale of advice, and Kurt can help me exactly how many pages in relation to dealing with the GAC advice. Again, another substantial amount. Is there any particular area of GAC advice that you could help me with, Kevin? Because I don't want to avoid the question, but I'm not quite sure where to start.
I was referring to the letter sent on the 18th, the trademark issues, the competition concerns.
Well, there's just so many of them. Let's pick up on one, for example, the suggestion by the GAC that the preponderance of evidence test that we've got in relation to two of the remedies. One is the post-delegation dispute, and the other is the URS. Those have got a preponderance of evidence standard. Now, the GAC has come back to us and said that that's a criminal standard. Well, that's first of all a mistake. The criminal standard is beyond all reasonable doubt. But putting that aside, it is a higher standard than is available in civil law. The lowest standard in civil law is on the balance of probabilities. So when there's a contractual dispute between two parties, that's the balance, that's the fight. One of them just has to win on the balance. But this isn't, these kinds of remedies aren't ordinary commercial situations. One of them is the URS, the special situation that we've designed for when a trademark owner is using their trademark and suddenly someone registers it and puts up some kind of infringing material or some other abuse or damage to that party. We've created a brand new system, the URS, to allow that trademark owner a very rapid takedown. Now, the trade-off that owner has to pay for a very rapid takedown is they have to prove their case to a high standard. Now, the board has absolutely no difficulty with that, and we think that the suggestion that extraordinary remedy should be available to anyone without a high standard of proof, is just wrong thinking. So I can work through those, Kevin, if you like. There's about sort of there's quite a few of them. Same applies in relation to the post-delegation dispute resolution process. This is a brand new remedy that wasn't created before. Under this, a person who believes that their trademarks are being misused inside a registry now has a cause of action open to them against the registry itself. Previously they didn't. The registry was regarded as a third party outside the transaction. You could go after the registrant and you could go after the registry. Now, under this provision, you can go after the registry. You go after the registrant and the registrar. Under this new process, you can actually go after the registry itself. And one of the sanctions that's available to you is to actually have our ICANN cancel the contract with the registry. So let's put that into context in relation to our .com domain name. If a person can prove that the registry is in cahoots with some bad actors, they can actually have ICANN cancel the contract with VeriSign to run .com. Just stop for a moment and think about the magnitude of that as a remedy, and then you'll understand the board thinking that if someone's going to bring a case like that, it's going to have to be argued and proved at a pretty high standard. So, I mean, we can go on through the list. Perhaps, Kurt, do you want to add one?
I've got one thing I'd like to add first, Peter, which on your first point regarding the trademark issues and the clearinghouse and the provision of the proof of use. One of the other additional reasons why the thought is that step is valuable and has to do with the fact that provides very useful information for law enforcement. So, go ahead, Kurt.
Yeah, I suppose. Oh, sorry. The one that we spent the most time talking with the GAC about, as it happens, was this requirement for proof of use in relation to use of these remedies that are available, and we obviously had a major disconnect between what the governments thought we were doing and what we think we're doing. And they talk about this kind of thing not being available in trademark law, and that's the clue to the difference. What we've been creating are sunrise rights, and we've been looking at the trademark and other qualifications one needs to acquire a right in relation to the sunrise, and we describe that, and that's very different from what the GAC seems to think the trademark should do, and that everyone who's got a registered trademark ought to be able to go into that system. And so we've maintained the proof of use requirement for all the reasons I think that we set out pretty clearly in this discussion with the GAC.
Raju?
Yes. So anyway, thanks, Kevin. I think it's important to recognize that we started with 12 major issue areas with the GAC and 80 sub-issues. And about 30 of them were a litany of trademark issues, and now we're down to 4 of them. And what we're arguing about is, as Peter and Rod said, we're really one part of the community thinks we'll better protect trademark owners if we take one stance, and another section of the community thinks we should take another stance. So what we saw in the GAC meeting yesterday was really a spirited debate about the best way to protect registrants and the best way to protect trademark owners. And the board listened to all parts of the ICANN community. And at the end of the day, there were, four very specific issue areas where there's continuing to be a difference among, 30 other trademark issues and 80 issues all told, which really reflects, I think, a spirit of compromise and agreement.
I'm Raju Gopalakrishnan from Reuters. You're accepting applications for the new GTLDs from January until April. Do you have a sense of when these applications will be approved? When will we see the first new GTLDs on the net? And how long will it take? I mean, for how long a period will they have that name? Will you review it at some stage, or is it in perpetuity? How's it going to work?
Sure. You're correct, Raju. We'll begin accepting applications on January 12th, and then we'll be closing that window April 12th. So it's open for 90 days. The specified minimum was 60, but we decided to, roughly 90 days, 3 months, I should say. We decided to do a full 3-month process. The first possible time at which some of the applications could be approved would be late in 2012. So I'm not forecasting that they specifically will be completed by then, but that's the earliest possible time. And if you want any more details on that, Kurt has helped to architect the program and can answer any more questions. TLDs are delegated in perpetuity.
Just as a minor detail on that, we have a sort of a presumptive renewal in the contract. So when they sign the contract, if they keep performing according to the standards and keep meeting their objectives, etc., then there's a presumption that we will renew their contracts. We have the ability to go in and change the contracts occasionally, and the contracts are also subject to when the community makes binding policy. Those get translated into the contracts as well. So they're relatively living documents between the operator and the community. But I say, if they keep performing at the appropriate standard and level, then there'll be a presumption that they'll be renewed.
We've got an online question from Jonathan Hughes in London, a freelance technology and business reporter. Can you explain the time lag between today's acceptance of the resolution and when you're opening up applications in January?
Certainly. In the applicant guidebook that was approved today, there's a minimum 4-month formal communication program window. And in our view, we're started the communication program right here with this press conference. This is the beginning of the communications program. However, we've decided to take additional time because we want to make sure that we really spread the word on this around the world in all major regions so that parties that have not yet heard about the program are aware of its availability. So we've decided to invest more in the communication program because we felt that would be the best thing to serve the global public interest in this first round of the program.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm actually from the Asahi Shimbun. My name is Mr. Ng. I would like to ask you one question is, today's approval of this guideline on the TLDs, how will it affect the normal people when they use the internet? And also how will it affect companies?
Sure. I think it depends on where you live in the world. So, for example, if you live in Japan, it's going to mean that besides, I know there was an application for the Japanese IDN CCTLD. I believe it's in the route now. Is that correct, Kurt? I don't know. Okay, I'm not sure. But it means that there could, if applicants came from Japan, there could be the equivalents of generic top-level domains like .com or .net or .org, for example, in kanji or katakana or hiragana, in your own local scripts. The same thing for China. It means that whether you're in China or Singapore, countries use Chinese script or Devanagari or others, that you could have top-level domains in those scripts, as well as new terms that might be in Latin scripts. So it opens up the right of the dot. So when you think .com, .net, now think .open to new things, to new ideas. Thank you.
Another question from Jonathan Hughes. Give us a rough guess, if you can, as to the initial number of applicants you're expecting.
I'll answer that one if I can. We don't have any specific expectation. As we mentioned this morning, there's about 120 different parties that have said they intend to file it through some public disclosure statements, and about 90 have websites marketing their offerings, but we do not have a forecast. And the reason is that we did not receive support from the community and to do an expression of interest that would have allowed parties to indicate about a year and a half ago whether they were interested or not. And I won't get into all the fine detailed issues of why the community didn't want to move forward with that, but in essence, some people didn't want to delay the program, and others thought it was in some way stepping into the program too soon. But so we don't have a forecast.
Kieran?
Hi, I have a specific question about one part of it, which is the
Kieran, for the sake of the folks monitoring, ID yourself, will you?
Oh, sorry. My name is Kieran McCarthy from .next. The vertical integration issue, where you were changing the market rules, you backed away from what the initial plan was, following some letters from the U.S. government and the EC. My question is, what is the scenario that you have? You said you're going to have conversations with the competition. Is the expectation that you will change the current rules? Because I think the current rules are that there's a very, very small percentage allowed, 2%. Are you expecting that to increase? What is your expectation by the time we launch, or what are your hopes by the time we launch of what that will happen with that issue?
Well, thank you, Kieran. There's a number of elements to the question, so let's try and unpack it a little. So we changed the rules and allow full vertical integration for the new GTLDs. So anyone starting now wanting to can become a registry and a registrar in the TLD. What we face also is people who are currently running existing registries. So we've got we've got VeriSign that runs .com, and we've got Viewstar that runs .biz, for example. Under their contracts, they are currently prevented from entering the new GTLD system. So the resolution that we've done today allows them, as the original Palo Alto resolution intended, people who are caught by those original contracts, we need a process that they can transition in relation to becoming a registrar for new TLDs. So that's what this process does. Where there is an understandable area of interest from governments is in relation to changing the rules of the legacy operators for the legacy top-level domains. So in relation, again, to VeriSign running .com, the rules for changing that are something that we are very cautious about, and that's where the letters have come, and that's the area that we're going to spend quite a lot more time understanding the ramifications of changes to that particular relationship.
Can I follow up very quickly? So my understanding was that that the letters also said they were concerned about the process for new GTLDs. So I'm just checking. So what you resolved today was that you're going to maintain the original plan, which was to remove cross-ownership rules. Okay, despite that.
Yes, again, the letter isn't explicit. The Department of Justice letter says that in relation to the new GTLDs, the board should not allow vertical integration unless it certifies that they're not going to have market power. We're going to turn that around the other way and say they're all presumed not to have market power, but they won't be allowed to integrate if we decide that they have. And the reason that's relatively practical, most of the new TLDs when they start, almost by definition, cannot have market power. They're just brand new, they're just starting. So rather than impose a burden on every single one of them to go through a proof of not having market power, we're turning around and saying, well, let's make it slightly more practical. But the point is that we think we're meeting the objective, which is be careful about market power in relation to this market, and be very careful about abusive, substantive market power in that market.
We've got you guys, anybody want to add anything? We've got a question from Monica Emmert in Germany. There are still things to be filled into the guidebook. When will all those things be done, such as those additions mentioned by the GAC? When will we see a final guidebook, and will the guidebook change between round 1 and round 2 of applications?
The guidebook's intended to be exactly that, a guide for potential applicants of new TLDs. And when the board approved the guidebook today, it certainly felt that it's sufficiently complete to inform every applicant of what their duties are, what their requirements are in order to apply for a new TLD. What's lacking in the guidebook now, I think, are certain dates that have been filled in by the board. And there's also some ongoing work. The board is very enthusiastic about providing support for applicants from developing areas where the evaluation fee or access to technical expertise might be somewhat of a bar. So ICANN will continue to work on that applicant support aspect to support those applicants from developing countries who require that sort of aid.
Hi, Peter Ollier from Managing Intellectual Property magazine. You've made the decision now to keep the use requirement for certain trademark protection mechanisms. Could you give us some more detail about how that's going to work in practice and how you can stop? I mean, you said yesterday that it was there to stop people gaming the system, so how can you stop people gaming this aspect of the system as well?
I think the short answer, Peter, and thanks for the question, is that this is part of the ongoing development work. Now, that's an implementation issue that's going to have consultation, in particular with the operators of the clearinghouse, and we will be discussing with the community how to answer your question. How should the clearinghouse manage those processes and practices to make sure that it can't be gamed? There's a seminar, I think, Kurt, on Thursday or Friday on now that we have a program and now that we're going to have a clearinghouse, this is the kind of issue we need to now move down the track and start to solve.
Kevin, you had another?
Yes, I was wondering if you could clarify the support for developing world applicants. It's not clear how you will respond to questions about prices before the work of the Jazz Working Group is finished.
Sure. The resolution that the board approved stated that the board would approve up to $2 million for expenditure to assist applicants, needy applicants from developing countries. It did not specify the precise mechanism, whether that would be through a reduction in the application fee or through some other capacity building or technical assistance. There's different forms it could take, and the reason the board resolution didn't specify that is because we haven't had the input from the community yet. The Jazz Working Group is a joint working group between the GNSO and ALAC, and it's yet to produce its report. That report, if they choose, and let's also make clear, it's up to working groups and the supporting organizations like the GNSO to decide their time frames for reports. What we make clear is we will be open to their input as well as other input in the board's consideration of how the board will approve a more specific program that we then will then go and execute.
Could I follow up quickly? So what if the working group doesn't conclude and the GNSO doesn't approve these rules before the application period opens in January?
Then the board will need to consider alternatives, and the alternatives would include other possible programs or solutions submitted by other parties in the community, or to defer and wait to the second round. But I believe the board has signaled that it would like to see something as a part of this first round in response to the very clear messages from the community that they would like to see action or some help for developing country applicants in the first round.
We've got a question from Paco Fernandez of Mexico. Will entities that have been running IDN TDLDs outside the ICANN system, I don't know what he means by that, have any claim of an alternative TLD they've been running? I think he may be talking about the alternative systems that are coming up in terms of TDLDs.
I have an answer. No.
Can we go for brevity next time, Rod?
Yes.
Kurt, can you describe the most in terms of the applicant guidebook, what are the central core parts of that very long document that an applicant should center on?
Module 2, with Rod's aspiration to brevity. Much of the guidebook addresses where conflicts or disputes may arise and how they're resolved, but the gist or gravamen of the guidebook is described in the 50 questions that each applicant must answer, and the criteria by which those answers are measured are included in Module 2 of the guidebook too, that the applicant has the financial and technical wherewithal to operate a registry. So of that big, thick document, those questions and the criteria are intended to be a roadmap for applicants in guiding them how to competently operate a registry, where they can go out, get help and advice, and learn the answers to those questions, and then build a viable registry.
We have no other questions online. Other questions in the room? Kieran?
Hi, Kieran McCarthy. I have a question with regard to the GAC early warning system and GAC consensus, which is the crucial missing part of this left. And I suppose the question is, you agreed with the GAC very strongly expressed the need for them to devise their own system to what is consensus. The original, what the staff came up with was that we want you to provide an explanation as to why you are opposing a particular string. In the back and forth that you're going to have to go through, what to you are the red lines that the GAC early warning system or the GAC consensus must have in, and what are the areas where you're like, well, that's entirely up to governments how they approach it?
At the simplest level, they have to say what it is that they're objecting to. But the GAC binds itself, as we all do, by the basic ICANN principles of accountability and transparency. So those were the principles that the board was pushing, or that was the side the board was coming from. The GAC was coming back with the other principles that we also respect, which is national sovereignty and the GAC working effectively in its own and developing its own mechanisms. The last actual dispute was kind of interesting in that what we had done was taken the exact words that came to us from the GAC and put them into the process, and the GAC said, well, actually, we didn't mean you to use those words as bylaws, if you like, as rules. What we were signalling to you was the process that we were going to use. So we're quite happy, having got that information, to say, all right, we'll take the words out. So there may be less to this dispute than perhaps the back and forth might indicate. What we all want is an effective mechanism for the GAC, which we've set up to give us this advice. What we need is an effective mechanism for that body that's so important to us to be able to communicate with us. And the other thing I think is that this will grow in the maturation of the organisation, and as we face different issues, different methods of communication will be appropriate. So I don't think this should be a sort of a problem area. It'll be an area of mutually exploring how we can work better together.
Got a question from Eric Iriarte. Can you elaborate on how the JAS will work, please?
Yeah, how it will be working, it's up to that group to decide how it's going to do. Their relationship is with their sponsor, the organizations of the GNSO and the ALAC. Or Eric, can you maybe repeat the question or restate it so that I can understand it better if in the event I didn't answer your question?
And we'll wait for a response on that since that's online.
Hi, Sam Holmes from Dow Jones Newswires. Apologies if you're covering old ground in answering this question, but could you give us a bit of history as to how you came to the 185,000 figure for applications? Is there an average anticipated cost per application?
I'll answer at a high level and let Kurt give you detail. The answer is yes, that there was a costing out of the program and what needs to be spent internally on the processing as well as externally through the third-party contracted resources. And then there's also a set-aside of roughly 1/3 for a reserve to cover potential litigation or other contingencies that are not envisioned in the regular operating costs. I will let Kurt expand on that if you want any further details.
Yeah, so Rod was pretty complete. It's ICANN's policy that the evaluation fee is charged on a cost recovery basis, so just matches the costs associated with evaluating the applications. And so, as Rod said, the application processes were costed out for the 6 different evaluations that each application goes through. There's also a portion of the costs allocated to what you might term risk or contingency, but a number of low probability, high cost items that may occur and what the present value of those are. And then there's a smaller cost allocated to recovering the development costs of the project. So ICANN's following the policy directive that the costs be allocated, that the costs be allocated out and the fees be on a cost recovery basis.
And how do you plan to invest any windfalls or surpluses that might arise out of this? How do you plan to invest any windfalls that might arise out of this?
So we don't. So the estimate may be low, and we might have to increase fees in the future. The estimate may be high, and we would lower fees in the future. If substantial revenues were to accrue to ICANN, that would be unexpected. ICANN's a not-for-profit organization, so there are strict rules governing how we could handle that revenue, and the revenue would be expended in accordance with some sort of community discussion that also meets our legal requirements to maintain our not-for-profit status.
Can I just add a little bit to that, because there really is only a very small prospect of there being surpluses of any, for the reasons that Rod and Kurt have said. We start on a cost recovery basis, and we monitor that, and as we go through multiple rounds, our ability to predict and the size of the contingency, etc., and our planning will become better. So we'll be recovering closer and closer to the actual cost without surpluses. There is a prospect that if there are identical applications, or 2 or more applications, and none of our evaluation processes separate them, they both end up at the same point in competition with each other. This is what we call string contention. Then the community said the best way to resolve who wins is an auction. And so there is that prospect that there will be a couple of identical applicants and applications. Now, my personal guess is that we'll see very few of those. As a businessman myself, the last thing I would want to do facing this kind of situation is give ICANN a whole lot of money when I could go and do a deal with the other applicant. I think we'll see much more of that going on than auctions generating really exciting surpluses. If they do, then the community will come up with a process of how to return that money back to the community for good works.
Raju Gopalakrishnan again from Reuters. You said that you've received indications of interest from about 120 parties. Could you give us some details? Are these the big corporations of the world, the Toyotas, the Apples, the Googles?
Okay, sure, Raju. Let me first respond. We have not received indications of interest. Rather, 120 parties approximately have expressed publicly their interest in the program. So not to us, but they've expressed it publicly because we have not accepted any expressions of interest as ICANN. I think if you scroll through one of those lists, which some of the other journalists here can probably provide a URL link on because it's not part of our publications, you probably see some major brand owners, some major companies in the world, some major brands, cities, regions, and other different types of communities.
I think that to us really is part of the most exciting part of this, is to starting to see, even at this early days before the program was launched, the genuine demand from the community for this additional method of expression. As Rod said, we've seen them coming from people with political inclinations, cultural, linguistic, business, all sorts of creativity and enthusiasm coming out. There's .eco and .green that are going to be pushing those particular ecological and natural sort of forces. We've seen the cities applications from .Berlin, .New York, and .Paris, .Rome, .Milan, .London. All these are very active. It's going to be a tremendous opportunity for people to take control of this aspect of their branding and develop it in their own way.
And Rod, we heard back from Eric. You asked if he had follow-up or wanted clarification. He said, by way of clarification, will there be any kind of support for the proposals from developing countries, financial support, or less fee for proposals from developing countries?
Okay. Thank you, Eric, for the question. That question will not be answered until we receive the input of the community. As the board expressed today, even with respect to the GAC, advice that there be a 76% application fee reduction, the board's response was we neither accept nor reject that advice. It will depend upon the community input that comes from that we receive. So there is not yet any specific solution, and we also welcome Eric and any other community members and anyone around the world to submit their ideas, either to the Jazz Group or there's actually already a public comment posting on our website on this topic where anybody can share their ideas of what they think would be the most effective way to make the greatest contribution to needy applicants in developing countries.
And we have another question from Monica Emmert in Germany. Board member Mike Silber spoke about an artificial deadline, and that process should have been completed. Why not wait a few more weeks or even a few more months?
I think a number of board members said the opposite in their own comments, and Steve Crocker, I think, who's regarded, if you like, if not one of the fathers of the internet, at least one of the uncles. In terms of having been around and helping co-develop this, from the 1960s, and somebody with tremendous integrity and somebody that I respect enormously in the process. And Steve's perspective was that unless there's some reason to hold this back, it should be allowed to go forward, and that it's never going to be perfect, but that's not the way things develop. Steve's conclusion, which I agree with, was that this program is good and it's sound, and he's wholeheartedly behind it. So I think you need to contrast that, if you like, from the minority view, which I think is, in many ways, is obviously a very safe view. Something will always be better if we take longer to polish it. The question is, should we hold up this enormous tide of enthusiasm, this demand that's coming from the community for this, just so that we can make it, marginally better? And in the end, the majority of the board took the view that enough was enough, and this good program is certainly good enough and strong enough to launch.
And if I may add to that, I think that the diversity of articulate opinions issued by the board also shows how seriously they take this and other issues.
Kieran?
Hi, Kieran McCarthy. I'd like to go back to the money issue. I have a question which I don't know whether it's true or not, and then related to that, which was, we talking about the cost recovery. My understanding was that a big chunk of the cost recovery was in cost that ICANN has already expended in order to get here. So in that sense, you're still getting hold of the money. You'll still have actual money in the bank account, which you will have to do something with. That is right. Okay. So my question is, I'm slightly concerned that you say we'll do it when we'll go to the community if we get the money. So I think you will definitely have a big chunk of money. So is there a plan in place now to start asking the community, what do we do with this money?
That cost recovery of developmental costs is about $25,000 or $26,000 per application, so a relatively small percentage of the whole. And it was intended to recover those costs because we thought that the new GTLD applicants should be bearing the cost of the development and not the registrants who were paying fees into ICANN for all that time. And so that money is meant to be fed back into ICANN. Remember that ICANN's a zero-sum game. It's a not-for-profit. So money's received at that relatively low level essentially just feed into ICANN's budget, and then if ICANN has enough money, then it would lower fees to registrants as a result. So, like I said, it's a zero-sum game at the end, and it was intended that the new GTLD applicant should pay the money and not registrants from the years during the development.
If I can just add to that slightly, you know that ICANN has a reserves policy set by the Finance Committee and approved by the community, and that's to have on reserve 1 year of operating expenses in case something goes wrong. We regard the money that's been advanced for the new GTLD program as advances from that reserve fund, and so the very easiest thing is when the money comes back is to put it back and top up the reserve fund, which has been running low, if you like, while this has been going on. So. Again, we don't see that as a windfall or profits. This is putting us back into the position that we think we need as to be safe and secure custodians of this particular element of the public trust. So it'll go back into the reserves fund.
We've got a question from David Cohen in Israel. A point of clarification on the newly approved GTLD process. Would a registrant be able to register .com domains in Arabic, and how would previously registered Arabic domains with an English .com be treated?
I'll take a stab at this, and Kurt, you can augment. The first thing is that the letters COM is not a universal word. It's an abbreviation that ended up being a TLD. So no party has ipso facto or prior rights in translations of that or versions of that in other languages. I mean, in other languages, presumably you have different words for commercial or for business. So there are no prior rights, as it were. That's with respect to the first question on TLD applications. With respect to the second question, which is about what we call second-level registrations. So what if you filed an Arabic second-level domain name at .com? Do you have a prior right then for a TLD? The answer again is no, although if you own the trademark on that Arabic term that you have, you would be able to submit that into the global clearinghouse, Mark's clearinghouse, to get sunrise privileges. That's my understanding. Kurt, do you have anything else to add?
Well, that's exactly right, and this is meant to provide opportunities for people in Israel and elsewhere to communicate URLs fully in their own script. So where now he or she has to type in a Hebrew second-level name and a ASCII top-level domain, we are very hopeful that this new program will provide those new TLDs where the whole URL is in the language of people's choice.
So what's been created, we hope, is a very open and fair field for everyone to come and participate and compete based on the merits of their applications. So hopefully, David, that can create some good opportunities for people in Israel, among other places.
Hi, Kevin Murphy from the Register again. Rod, earlier today you talked about the need for new ethics rules governing revolving door principles with ICANN staff or board members, I guess, moving into the GTLD registry space. Could you explain a bit more about that, what you think needs to happen?
Sure. If I can first clarify what I believe I said was that I think that we need to look at the ethics issues. Certainly there'll be new pressures on the board, community, staff, and applicants. This program is unleashing potentially a lot of potential economic value for the applicants and the new businesses they might create with those TLDs. Many of those applicants have been very sophisticated participants in the community, contributing to the policy dialogue, debates, and drafting, and that's what they should be doing. That's why we call it a multi-stakeholder community, because there are stakeholders that come to the table. That changes. So what I talked a little bit about is we're closing one chapter on the book. With the applicant guidebook being finished, we close that chapter. And as we move into the application processing phase, we have to be, that process, that sort of permeability between applicants who were potential applicants and the staff and many other things will need to be looked at. I did not refer to the revolving door either of board and staff. I know other people in the community are using those terms. I didn't refer to that. On that side, I feel we're already quite well protected. We do have confidentiality agreements in place with all of our staff and the board members as well, and those will be enforced. So if someone leaves the board or staff and goes into an organization that might be active in this field, they cannot take any confidential information with them. So that is already in place, and as I mentioned in my speech, we'll be making sure that we're enforcing those agreements.
As a quick follow-up, is there any reason why anybody on the panel right now shouldn't be allowed to go and work for a new GTLD registry?
Kevin, can you help me understand which panel? Oh, up here? No, I don't believe so. I mean, in the sense that as long as no one here or in the organization takes any confidential information. Peter, I should let you.
Well, I'm just hoping that you're under contract, right, for another year. So I was hoping that wasn't going to apply to you. So that would be a problem. No, there's no current prohibition on us, or in fact almost anyone going and working for a new TLD.
We have a follow-up question from David Cohen in Israel. To further clarify and by way of follow-up, the system, under the system as you describe it, won't it make a situation where two different registrants own the same identical keyword / brand name, only one has it with a .com in Latin characters and the other in Hebrew characters?
But that's the case at the moment. I mean, the same thing that different people own the same brand, same thing in .com and .net, or in .nz or in .au, or in .au and .singapore. So that's not a situation that causes any concern at the moment. So IDN having that also happen in relation to IDN characters doesn't add anything further to that existing situation.
We have no other questions online. Any final questions from the room? Any journalists in the room? If not, I want to thank you, gentlemen, very much. And if I can just add a personal note about Peter's departure, this is an organization that talks a lot about transparency, and as the point of contact for the news media, I've thrown a lot of journalists at Peter. I don't ever remember him saying no to an interview by anybody ever. Peter, best of luck. You add true credence and credibility to the often stated transparency and accountability for the organization.
Hear, hear.
Thank you, Brad. It's been a pleasure, and I regard it as part of the obligation of accountability and transparency. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen.